Tim, where were you when I was a kid?
If you saw a newspaper article that says found to cure cancer or eliminate heart disease or whatever, you'd be like, whoa!
Actually, it does.
Yeah, but if
you could print that article.
Welcome to Barbell Shrugged. I'm Mike Bloods here with Doug Larson and Chris Moore. And we're standing here with Dr. I always call you Doc Parsley. I was going to say Dr. Doc Parsley. Dr. Kirk Parsley.
Apropos.
Yes, he is an actual medical doctor, one of the few that will actually come on this show, and we appreciate it. All the other medical doctors hate us, I think. We had you on back at Paleo FX in April-ish, and I don't know when the show actually posted, but we got real deep into sleep and hormones, and you freaked everybody out.
Yes.
People listen to the show, and they were like, holy shit. I'm like,
I'm going to die.
I'm all blown out. Like, everyone was convinced that they were all screwed up, and hopefully,
And a lot of those people have emailed me.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I heard you on Barbell Shrug.
Yeah.
You ruined my life.
Yeah. Doc, I can't sleep. Help me out.
Yeah. Either you ruined my life or can you fix me? I live in Canada. Can we talk over the phone and fix this? Probably not.
No.
Mind a little more interaction than that.
One of the things you're trying to do is just educate people on this.
Yeah.
And so, because most of the problems that people have are self-induced. They're just
Absolutely.
They choose to not do this or that. But before we go any further, make sure you go to barbellshrug.com, sign up for the newsletter.
Know what's good
all right,
for
the
you.
one plug. All right. We can move on. So what have you been – you've been digging into some new stuff or getting deeper on some things since April. What are those things?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that there's a category for the type of things I geek out on. I just kind of go wherever wherever my brain takes me. So I just got back from doing a gig with Reno PD. Rob Wolf and I did it. Brought in a psychologist friend of mine from NSW who does a lot with the resiliency.
What's NSW for everybody?
Oh, Naval Special Warfare. So
yes.
he's been working with us.
That sounds serious.
Yeah, he's been working with the SEALs for most of his career. He's developed some good programs to help people maintain mental resiliency during times of fatigue or times of stress, and so forth. And obviously, a lot of what I'm talking about is physical resiliency, and not even if it's not for the kind of better judgment and fewer errors during stressful times. It's to increase your performance or to help you meet your goals, whatever. And then obviously nutrition fits in there hugely. So Rob and I and this guy Eric were all kind of doing that. DOJ is looking at that project, but
Department of Justice.
Yeah.
Yeah. This guy.
There you go. You got a good one.
I've actually had to deal with those people in the past.
Yeah.
We won't ask you why.
We don't have time. We don't have time to get into that story. We don't have time to get into that story.
And you are a doctor, and you were a Navy SEAL as well, so that's a really good fit for you.
Yeah.
You understand what those guys are going through.
Yeah. So the law enforcement guys and agency guys in DOJ, they have very similar day-to-day issues as SEALs, and overall, by and large, they have kind of the same long-term health issues, and a lot of that has to do with excess stress, and the way those types of communities, or even if you've been in one, you could imagine how those guys behave around each other, and kind of the social pressure to perform even when you can't, and so forth, and limited control over their diet, limited control over when they sleep, and they end up
fucked up.
Yeah. They end up with a lot of health problems. They end up dying about 10 to 15 years earlier than the average American. So do doctors, by the way. Big surprise.
So no control over their health and a highly competitive, performance-driven environment.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, since I've been out of the military, I've I obviously still work with any of the team guys who.
How long you been out?
January 13, coming up on 2 years. So,
Oh.
Have you fixed yourself yet?
Everybody here is kind of, we all fucked up. We can all agree on that a little bit on some level.
I am fixing myself. I'm in the process, and I'm, the meter's moving in the right direction. We'll leave it at that.
There's no done.
No.
Really. That's like saying you're fit enough or you're strong enough or
Yeah.
It's like it's like
no
eating.
done.
It's like eating once and for all, or brushing your teeth once. Finally, I did that. That's over with.
No more.
I finally flossed. It's it, right? So
wish.
it's an ongoing process. But one of the things that I ran into in the corporate culture that I didn't really have to deal with the SEALs, and by and large don't really have to deal with law enforcement officers or paramilitary or anything like that. Those guys, they come to me because they trust me. They want my opinion. I tell them what to do, and they do it. And usually they build some huge geeky spreadsheet and track like 500 metrics and report to me on a regular basis. And they're really sort of hands off, like, go forth, conquer, and do great things with this little bit of information I gave you, and they go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The corporate sector is much different. It's like, well, I hear what you're saying, but that doesn't really work for me. I don't really have time to do that.
You don't get it. My story is completely different than everybody else's story.
I'm a unique snowflake, and I own a $500 billion business, so like things are different for me. I can't sleep 8 hours. That's not realistic. So what else you got for me, kind of thing? And I'm like,
I can't help you.
I'm like, well, 2 + 2 is always 4. Like, I'm never going to be able to change that equation for you. I'm never going to be able to optimize your health if you aren't willing to eat right and sleep right and reduce your stress and get in some reasonable amount of activity. And of course, again, with law enforcement, they're a lot like military. The big trick on them is pulling them back from doing too much activity, especially when they're not metabolically fit to be doing any activity, and they still want to go do fight gun bad and see if they can hit their record or something like that. So anyways, that's a very long digression into kind of what I've been geeking out on is how do you actually change people's behavior? Because I keep going further down the rabbit hole onto how this changes this neurotransmitter and how that changes this and what it does to this region of the brain or what it does to your insulin sensitivity and how that affects mitochondrial density or what's going on in your cells or fuel partitioning, the metabolic energetics of when you're working out, like how that changes when you're sleep deprived, when you're stressed, when you have excess sympathetic, and just like I could go forever down there.
It's a profoundly deep issue.
That's all physiology, though. Psychology didn't play into the equation yet.
And then I can explain that to my patients. First of all, half the corporate world doesn't even want to know. They don't care. They're like, doc, just tell me what time it is. I don't care how the clock works. Just tell me what time it is. And I'm like, all right, it's this time. Go do it. And then I can't do that. I don't have time. I go, all right, bro. Let me. So
that'll be $1,000.
Yeah, it's gonna be the same price either way. Do it, don't do it. I don't really care. Pay the secretary anyway. So I really started just kind of getting down into that, and then I'm by no means an expert on it, but now I'm really intrigued, basically by the concept, the general concept that most of us would call willpower, right? And so, how can I make a change in my life that I want to do? How can I take a motivated client who's at least willing to dabble around in this and present it in a way, give him actionable steps in a way that gives him the highest probability of some good returns really quickly so that he'll be motivated to continue, right? And then what you find is like, okay, there's the psychology, psychologists have dug into this forever, and they have all sorts of tricks to tell you, here are the action steps. And they can talk about all the physiology that's going on, what, dopamine is this huge urge controlling thing. But then when you start looking at the fact, well, if you have wild fluctuations in your blood glucose, then all of this regions of your brain changes, and that's the region that you're using for willpower, or that's the region that you need for willpower to actually work. So the little trick I gave you isn't going to work if you're sleep deprived, and it's not going to work if you're just bombed your gut with a bunch of carbs and you're pre-diabetic, or
the hardware is not functional, right?
Right. So now it's like, how do I intertwine those two things? How do I get people to understand to some degree how they're breaking themselves and how to fix themselves, but also give them an actionable plan and make them realize that when they can't follow these simple actions, it's not because they're weak people or they're unmotivated or because they took the red eye or whatever their damn excuse is. It's because you're metabolically broken right now, and hence the reason we're trying to metabolically fix you. So now I go into I kind of split off on going too deep down in my original rabbit hole, and now I have to present them with this other information and say, so by the way, if you just say you're going to fix your sleep, for instance, and you're not going to do a damn thing about your diet, you're going to fail, and here's why. And then you go through the physiology of how their nutrition is going to affect their ability to make change.
Yeah.
And then you do the same thing if you're only going to fix your diet, and you're not going to, you tell me you have to be up at 3 a.m. in order to talk to the
markets in London open up
market
early.
in London, and all of that stuff you always hear. If you're not going to do this and you're not going to do that, then here's going to be the consequences. And so I kind of break it down into 4 pillars, right? There's nutrition, there's sleep, I call it activity, because some of these guys are just not fit enough to do anything that we would call exercise, right? It's like just walk around your block once or something, and then keep going. And then some sort of stress modulation, whether that's whether you're into an esoteric form of that and you want to go crazy with that, or if you're just a super scientific guy and you want like a heart rate variability training device, and that's
or just more masturbation. Doc, works like a charm.
It does. that releases some neurotransmitters that are very good for relaxation. And it's actually supposed to induce sleep. Where one of the things I used to put in my lecture, oxytocin release is actually supposed to improve sleep, but. And it's supposed to do it for both sexes.
Mike's like, that works every night.
Anecdotally, but it works.
I want to take a nap. But no matter how awake or tired I am, that's
that works.
Puts me right there.
But it seems is that somewhere along the last several hundred years, there's been some sort of evolutionary twist in female DNA where it makes them talk and ask questions and.
Damn female DNA.
Yeah.
Like, damn it, this would be so much better if you weren't in the room right now. But I don't mean that the way it sounds.
Your wife isn't going to watch this show, and
It's not that I want you gone.
She would never watch your show. Don't worry.
You can't be here anymore.
Don't go away mad.
Yeah.
Just go away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
sounds idealistic.
So it sounds like solo's the way to go.
Solo's the way to go. You are the master of yourself in so many ways, and there's so many puns you could pull off of. So just did that, and then obviously the week before or a few days before that, I was doing the Seal Fit gig, and it was really kind of very similar stuff about that. So
the Unbeatable Mind.
That's actually
what was the name of the event?
It was the Unbeatable Mind Retreat is the name of it. Which is just a great program. I was really impressed by that. I think he's doing a great job. That thing's grown.
Let's go that next year. Is that a thing we can go
I really
to?
wanted to go, but
it was one
we
last
were
weekend.
flying back while it was going from Europe. When it was
last year we did it, and they basically just put up like one of those catering tents in his courtyard of his event. And there was probably about a 20 to 30 knot wind blowing, and it was raining. And all they had to lecture with was like one of those flip charts and some markers. I show up with my notebook, computer, and a PowerPoint, and they're like, "Oh, we never thought of that." And I thought, "Oh, I never thought of that. I never thought you wouldn't have thought of that." So we're at an impasse here. We have to figure something out, man. And I was like, I don't think I can do my lecture without PowerPoint, just because of the way I build it and how complex it is. You have to have a lot of sort of.
But all my transitions won't appear. My points will be lost.
I did some really cool things. They moved me inside and put me on like a television screen, like a 60-inch television, and it was okay. But this year, like they did legit. They rented out a big conference room and.
It went all the way.
Had the biggest.
The
probably
Omni Resort.
Went the opposite. I think they went to the largest projection screen I had ever lectured in front of. Like,
sweet.
It's kind of like that General Patton thing where he's walking in front of that huge flag. That's how it felt. It was like this enormous PowerPoint. I'm like, oh, geez, Louise, man. Like the letters of my name was actually the same height as me. That was a great event, and they had some great speakers and that's about it. Still trying to get this sleep supplement out, and talking about building a sleep supplement where you're going to try to actually market that involves a lot of the same thing, right? Like how do you how do you explain to people why they need this? And
You want to tell everyone
think
about
I-
the sleep
Yeah, I actually didn't hear
supplement?
about what's in the supplement. I heard that you were doing it, but didn't hear about.
well, there's a provisional patent on the supplement, so my lawyers will not allow me to tell you what's in the
Okay,
supplement.
first
but-
of all, proprietary blend plus these things that
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
probably talk about.
So actually, it would not take a budding genius to figure out what's in the sleep formulation. Basically, if you go into a textbook and you look up the physiology of what changes in your brain and your body when you're going to sleep, and what changes when you wake up, and what things people tend to be deficient on. There you have it. Like this is usually here. This turns into that. That turns into that. And people are usually deficient in this and this and this. And you add those things together, but it's all just the normal physiological pathway to shutting down your adrenal function at night, which is oversimplification, but basically. By the way, a lot of your people like write me these emails going, "Well, what you said wasn't exactly correct because," and then I'm like, "Yeah, I know.
Thanks, bud.
I know this. I didn't have 40 hours. I had 1 hour. So
Yeah.
like this is an oversimplification.
There's a time to oversimplify.
Wikipedia says that's not true, Doc.
So really, by and large, your adrenals are what keep you awake. It's a little more complicated than that. There's some other wake promoting neurotransmitters, which are essentially just hormones in the brain. And there's no active mechanism to make you go to sleep. Like there's not a switch that just goes. And
I wish there were.
And now already I'm going to get 500 emails because there's going to be somebody who says, yeah, they found a sleep center switch. They just released the article 2 months ago. I read the article. I got it. Okay.
Got it.
But
was it a single piece of was it a single study or is this
it was a quality study, but it's not something you can capitalize on just because they say, well, okay, this little nucleus in the brain, this little area of neurons is highly specific to reacting to this neurotransmitter, which has a lot to do with the cascade of falling asleep.
It's interesting, but we need a little more work.
It's like, it's okay, great, but I can't go put like a toggle switch on that neuron, so it doesn't really help the fact that by and large you have a lot of chemicals, neurochemicals. We'll just call them all hormones. I call them all hormones because they all do the same thing. And in fact, if they're in your blood, they're called hormones. The same thing in your brain is called a neurotransmitter, although it's exactly the same substance. So you have a bunch of hormones in your body that promote wakefulness, and you have a bunch of hormones in your brain that promote wakefulness. So being able to sleep just is actually the absence of being awake. It's the absence of all of those wake-promoting neurons or neurotransmitters and hormones. So you get those hormones to go low, and you go to sleep, and then they actually go lower while you're asleep, and that's what allows you to go into deeper sleep. And then when you start coming back up in the lighter levels of sleep, those wake-promoting neurotransmitters and hormones are actually higher.
So I guess like stress, hectic family life, work up into the late PM hours, busy mind, all that is just stoking the adrenal.
Yeah, exactly. Because the adrenals, when you just try to take it down to the essence and say, all right, let's just talk about one little aspect of it, right? And by and large, the adrenals are the easiest thing and the most sort of comprehensive thing to talk about. There's always downstream effects of any hormone. You can't just affect one hormone in the body. It's not possible, right? Like it's just like move one.
We're all kind of interconnected,
Yeah.
and if you change one, you have really no idea how that's going to affect the others.
Right. Which is why there's so many problems with pharmaceuticals, because they just try to, well, I'm just going to fix this one little thing.
There, got it.
That one symptom is going to go away, and then.
And then 3 months later, you got this
5
other
billion
problem.
other changes are going to occur that we don't know what those things are going to be in each individual.
Speaking of pharmaceuticals, last time you were here, you said that a lot of people are taking sleeping pills and they're going to sleep, but you pointed out they're not actually going to sleep. They're just unconscious,
right?
Which isn't the same thing at all,
right?
How does that differ hormonally?
So, what we're just talking about with the let's just equate adrenal levels with being awake, right? Which is a pretty solid comparison. So right now we're sitting in a pretty cool environment, and our adrenals aren't doing a whole lot, but they're keeping us alert to what's around us, right? So if a guy climbs in that door and starts shooting a gun, like our adrenal
CTV's on it.
Our adrenal functions are going to go
Mine just actually went up. Yeah,
right, they're going to go way higher, right? If we're going through bankruptcy, our adrenal functions are going to be high all the time. If we're constantly trying to do things for work, even though it's time to be slowing down to go to sleep, our adrenal functions are going to be higher. If we get home and our wife's pissed off at us because we've been working all day and our kids need X, Y, and Z, and we got to do all this and that.
Family.
Then that's going to raise our adrenals.
So demanding. Baby, my adrenals are fried. Get off my ass.
I can't wait to hear the next.
By the way, this is not towards my actual wife. This is a joke for the show. Janie didn't really. Let's stop. The hole's dug.
Yeah. Just climb in it. Just climb in it.
Yeah,
now,
I'm gonna
buddy.
nestle it down in this hole now.
So if you take a drug, like if you do some sort of pharmacological trick that removes consciousness, all those hormones are still there. All the adrenal hormones are still there. So the normal sleep architecture doesn't happen like that, going really deep and coming back up into REM and going really deep again. Mm-hmm. And there's different things that happen at each stage of sleep. And so it doesn't matter if you're taking Ambien or Benadryl or Valium or drinking alcohol or whatever you're doing that's sedating you into going to sleep. Mm-hmm. You're messing with your brain's awareness, essentially, right? And once you get rid of a lot of the awareness, then you don't think about all the stressors and you can kind of drift off. But all of those stress hormones are still up in your body.
So this is like the most slippery of slopes at that point, right? Because now you can't even perceive what's going on in your life, and now you can't really fix anything.
And what happens with the sleep drugs is that they just remove your awareness of the environment. Mm-hmm. And you can actually have a conversation with somebody under the influence of some of these drugs, and it's not everybody, but it's, a substantial amount of people can take these drugs and get up and do all kinds of stuff.
I heard that if you take Ambien and you stay awake, you can trip your balls off.
Doctor, is that true?
I don't know that to be true, but there was a movie bit.
I was gonna say, like,
there was some kind of movie bit that reminds me of.
Is that the Ludes from Wolf of Wall Street?
No. There's this guy who said like he was going to take 3 Ambien and try to stay awake and then have sex or something, and then they both fell asleep. And,
man, give weed a try before you go that route. Like, make sure you exhaust all the other drugs before you try this shit. That sounds crazy.
But, I had she wasn't a patient of mine. But she was a friend of mine who her doctor gave her Ambien because she couldn't sleep. Completely true story, and she's a nurse, so she's educated about all the stuff to some degree, as much as any other healthcare practitioner. And she takes this Ambien, she goes to bed, she takes this Ambien, she falls asleep, and then the next morning she comes downstairs, and somebody is like broken into her house and ransacked all sorts of stuff. No. And
the first night she took Ambien.
Yeah, and she
unlucky.
She's like this little 90-pound chick, and she's home alone, and she's freaked, right? So she runs back upstairs and locks herself in the bedroom and calls the cops, and the cops show up, and turns out that was her who had ransacked her entire house, and she'd gone through and like,
ma'am, we got to throw you in jail.
she'd like gone and eaten all of her kids' cupcakes and ramen noodles and like.
Is it just like the subconscious mind going fucking crazy, uninhibited, and just doing whatever it wants?
There's no filter, right? Because your social filter that we think of, like the social veneer that keeps us from saying the things we shouldn't say.
That's all the thin layer on the outside of the brain that's helping keep the shit together.
Yeah, primarily that prefrontal cortex. That's a social filter to make you do not only the socially acceptable thing, but that's what allows you to do the harder thing when you want to do the easier thing, right? Yeah, right. And so if you strip away consciousness, that's what you're stripping away, essentially, right? Because
now you're just a monkey man just raving through your house.
Yeah, exactly. Now all you have is the lizard brain, right? And all the lizard brain does is the 4 Fs, right?
That's right.
You fight, you flee, you freeze, or you
fornicate.
You can say
Yeah. So
like, do you mean fuck?
Well,
No, but why the hell do they allow doctors to prescribe it? If it's obviously that this is not actually a sleep drug, why is it allowed to be prescribed to people when all it's doing is knocking out your ability to control your fucking body?
Well, that's a very deep physiological.
I know. Like, there's a question, but it seems like fundamentally, if it's a sleep medication that doesn't actually allow you to sleep, somebody would say, "I got a question. As physicians, why do we allow this shit to happen?"
Well, because you get enough research that says, "Well, look, this kind of looks like sleep, right? Like, we did this, that, and the other thing, and these people, like,
his eyes are clearly closed.
That looks fairly. that looks fairly close to sleep architecture, and the guy wasn't sleeping at all, and now he got an extra.
Guy's getting like $1,000 a week.
He got an extra 13 minutes of sleep, kinda. Yeah, so
And he publishes that research. Funded by pharmaceutical company XYZ.
So philosophically, you could go into all sorts of tangents about that, but basically, the reason I would say that most of this exists is the same reason that all pharmaceuticals exist, right? And actually, if you can't even get doctors to agree on what the definition of sleep is, right? So until you get there, you can't truly have a sleep drug, right? Because if you can't even define what sleep is this a sleep drug or not? It's actually an unconsciousness drug, but depending on your definition, it can fall into sleep, right? So we're going to call this a sleep drug. But if you think about it, there's a continual pressure in medicine with the reimbursement system to see your patients for shorter and shorter periods of time.
Yeah.
In fact, while I was in medical school, they taught us like this script that we said to people if they came in with multiple complaints. You said, "I'm sorry, I'd really like to help you with all that, and I'm more than willing to help you with all these problems, but unfortunately today we have limited time, so if you could just tell me what your number 1 and 2 complaint is, and we'll handle this first, and if we have time, we'll get to the rest of them."
Like, due to insurance purposes.
Yeah,
you can't treat someone for 5 symptoms.
And if you look at the payback system for like a physician's private practice, I think I've read something recently. I think it's only like $28 profit for your average patient visit or something, right? So if you spend, and that's with a 6-minute visit, which is the average physician's visit, 6 minutes a visit, and then about the same amount of time to chart. And then maybe a little bit of scut work in between there, and like you're at this 15-minute window, which is about all you have for a patient for it to be profitable.
Do you think adding a lot of bureaucracy and laws is going to fix this problem?
Oh, I think the government-run healthcare.
This time they got it.
I mean, adding another level of bureaucracy is obviously the solution to this problem. That's going to help.
So this
is
going to help. This is something that affects people, I guess, in a really profoundly huge way. Because if you're somebody who's struggling with, hey doc, I feel confused. I don't feel good. Like I'm struggling with joint pain, this, that, and the other. And he pulls up your blood panel, and 5 minutes goes, well, nothing crazy going on here.
Well, actually, he can't even order that blood panel until he can justify it, right? So he has to say, okay, well, what's the symptom here that I can justify ordering a blood panel that your insurance company will actually pay the lab company for? So there's a lot of games there. But then the other aspect is that medical school, one of the things I talk about in my lectures is that throughout my entire education, I got to the SEAL teams and they all had these sleep issues. And it was actually really performance issues that I discovered was coming from the sleep issues, right? And that was through a lot of weeding around and figuring stuff out for myself and going into a lot of sort of alternative and esoteric experts to try to piece all this together.
When you say sleep issues, is that just they just don't get enough sleep, or they can't fall asleep, or what?
Well,
I know being sleep deprived is almost like a way of life for those guys.
Right. So, I mean, they're like law enforcement and other agencies in that a lot of times they don't have control of their sleep. But even when they come home from deployment and they have some downtime, but they've had this really chaotic sleep cycles, because in the SEAL team's like, hey, you could wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning and they say, hey, we're going out tonight. We're going to be gone for 3 days. So if you want any sleep, you better get it before 6 p.m. I just woke up. So like, how am I going to get it?
Not going to go back to sleep now.
I can take some Ambien and I'll go back to sleep, and then I'll get up.
We're going to do this big, long 3-day terrible thing. Get some rest now.
Yes.
And imagine on a 3-day mission, it's basically expected that you are not sleeping.
Yeah. So any kind of sleep you got wouldn't be, it wouldn't be deep sleep. Obviously, you'd be it'd be semi-alert sleep the whole time.
Sure.
If you did have an opportunity to sleep in the field. So the problem with medicine is that they don't teach anything about health. Like the things you don't learn anything about in medical school is nutrition, sleep, exercise, or stress reduction, other than to give Xanax. Like that's stress reduction. Then those are the pillars for health. So medicine has kind of gotten boxed into an area where people are trying to use them for health promotion and health optimization, and they're not well equipped for it. Like your average gym owner is probably better equipped at optimizing your health than your doctor, because all your doctor's ever learned about is disease. And all we know about diseases is how to manage them with medications. Because we didn't learn any nutritional fixes for the disease.
I heard a doc who's based out of Vegas call it sick care.
Sick care.
Doctors are trained in sick care, not health care.
Yeah, it's disease. It's disease care. And when everybody says, "Oh, America's so advanced in medicine and all this," it's true in a few areas. Like if you're gonna get hit by a car, this is the country you want to be in when you get hit by a car. Like, your chances of survival are the best. Your recovery from that's going to be the best. Man, that had to hurt.
Look at the mental resilience on him to hold that camera straight as he stumped his toe.
CTP.
You
slam your shin.
Oh, your shin.
Yeah. You made me lost my turn.
And we're back.
Okay.
What you don't know that happened is CTP ran into a table, and then Chris's fat foot turned off. Turned off the power to all of our stuff. That's why you got a break.
An impromptu commercial break.
So now we'll be much fresher, and this will be way more interesting in the last
That's right.
second
We're
half.
talking about this is a great place to have a traumatic injury.
Yeah. So American medicine is great at trauma, and we're great at infectious disease. And then, we're one of the best places to deal with cancer as well. Although we're definitely not the top there. Like, we're in the upper echelon there. But if you look at overall health, obviously Americans have gotten progressively less healthy, as our medical technology has been increasing exponentially with computing power and technology.
It's not helping the fundamentals very much.
And there used to be, I always laugh and this is going to piss off half your audience, but I always laugh at the biohackers and I'm going to hack my body. I'm like, well, the original biohackers were doctors, or it was the pharmaceutical industry, right? And like, how has that worked out, right? Because that's exactly what they did. They said, well, there's all sorts of crazy shit going on, but this is the one thing that's bothering us. So let's figure out a way to make a pill that stops that one thing that's bothering us from happening.
Sometimes people call something biohacking, and it's like, get 9 hours of sleep.
Yeah,
like block out the light from coming in your room. Yeah, that's a hack. I don't know, that's a hack. I mean, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
but it's like people like start calling everything a hack, and I'm like, I don't know.
Live a really healthy lifestyle, and you'll be healthier. There's a hack for you.
I've given advice before, and they go, man, that's a really good hack. I'm like, or just something you do. Yeah, I don't know,
or just behavior or a thing.
Yeah, eat whole food. But that's a cool hack.
but a hack is a good buzzword to get people to do things.
Exactly.
So the rest of this episode is nothing but full of hacks.
Yes, that's right. So everything I do, you can relabel a hack, including me.
It seems like the modern medical world does a really good job of treating short-term acute injuries. You break your leg, they fix you up, you're out of there in a week or a month or whatever, or like you're back on your way to being better, but. Or chronic diseases even need a chronic solution. Is that kind of the model here?
Well, I like diabetes is a great example, right? Like diabetes is by far the most expensive disease we have. Like, you're going to die from something. Like, right? Every one of us
says you.
Right. So I don't
got a plan. I'm gonna upload my brain to a cloud.
I don't want to shock your audience, but we are actually all going to die someday.
Fuck, everybody's freaking out.
And
this is the worst episode ever. Everyone's so
kind of a downer, right?
I mean, you're probably going to die of one of 5 things, and you can look at the stats, and those things haven't really changed. And there's not a whole hell of a lot you can do about most of those things. But so you take something like diabetes is the most expensive thing because people get it really young, and then we have to manage it for decades before they die of a heart attack or stroke.
Most people manage it poorly.
Something else. Right. And by manage it, I mean, give you some pharmaceuticals to where you can survive for the rest of your life. And so
you can pay longer.
Yeah. And so something that actually a term that I use with my patients and clients is like, well, we work on your health span, not your lifespan, right? I don't promise you I'm going to make you live a day longer, and you might live less working with me. I can't promise you anything. I don't know for sure. But what I can tell you is I know how to make you healthy, and how to make you feel good, and how to optimize your performance and how you look, feel, and perform every day. And that's your health span. And in an ideal world, like our entire civilization, we could increase the health span, but then you would just freaking die, right? Instead, quality of life starts here when you're younger. As you get older, it's like dwindling, and then you just keep like your life is just not nearly as enjoyable, but you make it an extra 15 years, and we go, life, we've extended life.
I won.
Like,
you're
why?
miserable.
Like, what was the point of all of that crap, right? And so diabetes is a great example. We can give you all sorts of medications for this to reduce your average blood glucose throughout the day. And when things get really bad, we just start giving you hormones, right? We start giving you the insulin that your body's lacking or that your body's not responding to enough. And then you can survive even a little bit longer from that.
That's a decent enough fix.
But there's going to be complications from this, right? Because even though we're helping with your diabetic symptoms, you're still damaging your blood vessels. You're still damaging your nerves.
And the reason you have to introduce insulin in this scenario is because the excessive glucose is going to be toxic. It destroys things.
Yeah, because to get really geeky on that, there's an enzyme called the glycosylase enzyme that turns blood glucose into essentially like little sugar spheres or spears, like insulation. If you ever had insulation on it, it's this little stabbing glass
cell
thing.
membranes.
So that ages. So
your nerves have that in it, especially your alpha nerve fibers, which do a lot of your sensory. So people lose sensation because their nerves get glycosylated, and then red blood cells actually glycosylate. And when they go through capillaries, they go through one at a time. So if you can think of sending what used to be like this smooth little jello shot through this smooth tissue tube now has these little these little sharp things on it
and sharp little jello
and
shot.
So now they're stabbing this, and then they're clotting off that area, and then they have this high blood glucose and low blood flow, and they can't feel it. That's just this nidus for bacteria, right? So now you have this huge bacteria growth, and now you lose your toe, and then you lose your other toe, then you lose half your foot, then
But once this gets going, it's almost over immediately.
And so yes, we've managed your diabetes, but you've lost your foot over the right.
Is that why you go blind as well? Similar reason?
Yeah, it's damage to the vessels in the back of the eye and the nerves in the back of the eye. So that it's all the same thing. Mm-hmm. But instead, we could say, well, let's really educate people on nutrition and lifestyle. And guess what? If you do 30 minutes or to an hour of activity 3 to 4 times a week, and you go on a lower end carbohydrate diet and you get rid of all refined carbohydrates, you probably won't have diabetes anymore, period. And you don't need any sort of medication to do it.
And this is something I've actually heard people they'll walk into the gym and say, well, I've got diabetes. I'm like, well, and I was nervous to say this in the beginning, but I'm much more confident now. I was like, that's reversible. They go, well, my doc said it's not reversible.
Right.
Well, you got an MD right here saying it's reversible, folks.
So take that.
Yeah, and so the Medical Board of California can jump on my throat now, because you can never say that somebody's cured of diabetes, right? It's like you can't say that an alcoholic is ever cured of his alcohol, even if he never drinks again. But what we can say is that, well, we've completely normalized all of his metabolic parameters without pharmaceuticals for the rest of his life. If you still want to say he has diabetes, okay, fine. Like I don't have a dog in that fight. But that's sort of the medical model that we have. But again, if you go back to what we talked about earlier, how do I do that in 6 minutes? Right? How do I convince my patient in 6 minutes everything that he needs to do or she needs to do to rectify diabetic situation?
Right. And then you don't. Is that our problem? You don't do that.
You can't do that. You say, here, take this pill, and that will lower your blood glucose. That's going to lower how much glucose.
I got to go.
Especially if you end up in the conversation about, I'm special, that won't work for me. And then all of a sudden, by the time they've said their piece, you're like, well, the meeting's over. I got to go.
I mean, you think about it.
Hope you feel better, champ.
Going to see a doctor is a pain in the ass for anybody, right? Even the concierge's practices are getting really full now, too. And they're always waiting. There's a discomfort. It disrupts your day. And it's like, you better give me a frickin' solution, because I've spent so much of my time, I've spent my money, I've been paying ridiculous amount for health insurance that I never use, and I want a frickin' solution right now. So, okay, here, take this pill. That's going to reduce your pain. Go on. Like, I didn't do anything about what's causing your pain, but I solved your problem. And that's unfortunately just the way the system has been built. And then actually a really interesting coup that the pharmaceutical industry pulled off is, when they're doing their books, all the time they spend with doctors is now called education. So it's not marketing dollars. So now they're involved in educating healthcare practitioners, the pharmaceutical.
They didn't get education in school.
A lot of the schools are actually, medical schools are funded by pharmaceutical companies to a degree. Is that correct?
To a degree, like most medical research has something to do with the pharmaceutical, big pharma money is usually involved in there somewhere.
I don't think that's an evil thing. That's just just the way it works.
Yeah,
now you end up with like a. Yeah, I'm not saying like anyone's evil or anything like that. I'm just like
there are incentives baked in.
Yeah,
now.
There's just the system doesn't work in your benefit.
I don't think anyone was clever enough in pharma to sit back like 200 years and go, wow, here's how we're going to do this thing. But I think
you got a good evil voice, by the way.
Yeah, that sounded like an evil dog right now.
But I think what ends up happening is when you get into when you get into being a professor or a PhD, you're driven to publish, right? You have to do research, you have to publish, you have to do research, you have to publish. You're part of a medical institution. You want to have a higher reputation as a physician, even you should be publishing, right?
Right.
So everybody's driven to do research, and you have to get that funding from somewhere. And there has to be there has to be a question that needs to be answered. And so I was like, dude, I don't have any novel ideas. I'm a doctor. I want to advance. And like, hey, we have a need to test this.
Right.
Okay, well, I'll test that. And I don't think there's anything nefarious or malicious going on, but what happens is this is now what they know, right? I've spent 6 years figuring out how this drug affects this disease. And now I've taught all the medical students under my tutelage what I know about this. And so they're going to do that, and then they're going to teach the next generations of doctors that, because that's what they know.
Right.
But if we had, for instance, the same doctor who was involved in nutritional research for 6 years on how to handle nutrition for diabetes, and he promulgated that, he'd get fired.
The celery industry just isn't paying very much.
Yeah, exactly. So, So I think that's kind of how we got into that mess. And how we're going to get out of that mess, I don't know, other than just the fact that we aren't going to be able to afford to keep doing it the way we do. And so, what I encourage everybody to do is just take charge of your own health. Consider healthcare health insurance. Quit calling it healthcare. Call it health insurance.
Yep.
Just like you have automobile insurance. My automobile insurance doesn't replace my tires when they're worn down, right? It's for catastrophe, which is what medicine should be. So then you're really good with infectious disease. You're really good with trauma, and you're really good at, like, if you have cancer. Okay, that's what the insurance is for.
All that other stuff could probably be handled by a personal trainer.
Like really well-educated people in the health sphere, people who do podcasts and like people who...
He's saying to listen to us.
Yeah, right. like those barbell shrug guys, those geniuses.
What percentage of people with like ripped six-packs just spontaneously develop type 2 diabetes?
Yeah. I'd say low. That's a very, very low percentage.
If that's you, contact us.
You'd be much more likely to develop type 1 diabetes, which would be some sort of genetic issue, or there's some thought that it might be viral, but we won't go down that rabbit hole too far. So that I don't remember how we got onto that whole topic, but that's basically the idea of separating what we call healthcare now. We'll call that disease care, and healthcare is something you do on your own. That's educating yourself on improving your diet, educating yourself on improving your sleep, and reducing your stress and doing some smart exercise. The big problem is there's a lot of noise in that field, right? It's just growing and growing and growing. How do you know who to listen to now, right? You have these pseudo experts who've read a lot or maybe even had some impressive credentials, and they've come up with this biohack to where you don't need to sleep as much or you don't need to exercise as much.
I've seen these guys who I only need 4 hours of sleep. When I do these things, I'm like, how is that good? Like, I'm really confused here. Like, nothing replaces sleep.
And you can put E-stem on your abs instead of exercising, right?
Mike Menzer, remember that guy and his brother, the bodybuilders? So they used to take pride. Like, we train all day. We don't sleep at night. We just take amphetamines or whatever the hell they're doing. They stay up all night reading and shit. Like, we don't waste time sleeping. And then both fucking guys drop dead.
Well, is there an emerging industry right now of people that are kind of more like yourself, where they're medical doctors, but they're more involved in wellness and health? Than disease prevention.
So there's a couple of sort of big academic movements towards that. One's called the Functional Institute of Medicine, where they really focus on the physiology of making people healthy. Of course, you guys have heard of Andrew Weil, right? So he has his own similar thing, and that industry is usually referred to most commonly now as probably functional medicine. We started with, it's been called so many different names, and actually, what I always say I do is evolutionary health, because I just say, hey, let's try to approximate the way your body, this machine that's been developed over millennia, let's try to do with it what it was designed to do, and then see how things shake out before we start.
Of the way a little bit,
before we start implementing tricks and procedures and all this other stuff. Well, let's just do what we know we should be doing first. It's like your buddy comes over with his car, and, he's got 3 wheels on it, and he tells you, hey, I think the timing's off on, my ignition, and it doesn't seem to be firing quite right. We really need to fix the timing on my engine. And like, well, you should probably put the wheel back on and have 4 wheels first, right? And it's really, it's that stupid, and it's really hard to get people convinced that, you're in charge of optimizing these 4 things in your life, and there's plenty of people who will help you, right? Like if you say, I want to learn about nutrition, go to one of the interwebs, and there's you can read for the rest of your freaking life. Like the question is, how do you decipher that? Like, how do you say who's got good ideas and who's got bad ideas?
Most people out there that are giving nutrition advice, I mean, there's some exceptions out there, but 95% of the people out there are agreeing on 95% of the stuff.
Well,
people get caught up in the small percentage that they're
I would say
disagreeing
95% of people like us.
Maybe my circle is not as big as I think it is.
You might have a skewed sample. So if you
all my friends agree with me.
It's crazy how it works.
If you go to the ADA, they by and large do not agree.
Never mind, I forgot about that.
They are the largest nutritional organization.
I forgot about that, I haven't read that since
and they're
college.
going to tell you to eat grain, and a little bit of fat. If you eat a piece of bacon, you're going to die at the breakfast table for sure. So don't try that.
Are they coming along at all, or are they just like rigid in their former stance?
No,
I guess not their former stance, an old stance, I'll say.
I think there's a big sort of ego battle going on there. I don't know if you've heard of Peter Attia.
I haven't.
Gary Taubes, you've heard of for sure, right?
Sure.
So Gary Taubes and Peter Attia co-founded this organization called NUSI, Nutritional Scientific Institute. And what they're doing is, this is a non-for-profit organization that they're funding nutritional research that asks the question, basically, is everything we've been taught in nutrition wrong, right? Because if you read Gary Taubes' Good Calories, Bad Calories, he's basically like, this was all a master plot of Ansel Keys. All of this was wrong, and we should be eating this way. And so they said, okay, well, let's see if that's true. And so they're doing it, and they're spending tens of millions of dollars a year to do that. But the ADA is not budging. Like they've got their heels dug in, and now to satisfy the naysayers, they'll do research where they'll say, well, we had these people on low carb, and we had these people on a high carb diet, and we measured all these parameters, and they didn't seem to do any better, right? Well, their low carb diet was 65% carbohydrates, and their high carb was 75%. So it's like, okay, well, by any of our standards, they're both a high carb diet.
We're the 30% guys.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other big problem with these decades of data, embedded in this. I mean, it's no different than medical doctors, right? Like I talk to medical doctors about the influence of sleep and nutrition and exercise, and they're like, quack, whatever.
What's this douchebag talking about?
Like, whatever, I'm gonna get away from this dude. Like, I'm late for something. And and the nutritional industry is the same way. It's like this is decades of research that they're entrenched in. They have all sorts of textbooks. They have educational programs. There's degrees. There's policies. There's government policies. There's all sorts of stuff that you're going to have to say.
Yeah.
You know what? Turns out we were wrong. We need to flip all of this exactly upside down. And
is that like the doctors are looking at you like, well, that might be true, but good luck making money with that. See you later. Or do they really not believe you? Or
well,
what?
What happens is, we talk about, having your 6-minute patient visits, and that's in an optimal world, which you rarely hit that 6 minutes, right? So you're always behind on charting. And so now you're doing your charting when you're supposed to go pick up your kid from school. And so you're staying late and you're cranking. You're working 12, 15 hours a day to make a living and to do what you've already been taught to do.
You gotta pay those student loans somehow.
Exactly.
Now, when am I going to educate myself? When am I going to go consider whether or not somebody has this new idea? I'm going to wait for the peer-reviewed journals to tell me. And guess what? I don't even have time to read those. So I'm going to wait until I go to a conference, and somebody from the conference who's actually read these and has consolidated that into a palatable lecture is going to tell me what all these journals say.
That'll be 15 years from now when that all happens.
And he gives you advice, but he's also now a sleep-deprived, adrenally fatigued guy.
Well, yeah.
Now he can't learn it.
Doctors have all the same problems as the other overstressed C-level executives and law enforcement and all those other things. So it's a quagmire. I don't know how we're going to get out of it, but the nutritional guys are pretty dug in right now. There's some great research. By and large, it doesn't come from America unless it's coming from NUSI. Lots of people around the world are kind of slapping the ADA in the face with like, look, this really works. This really works. This really works. A project that Rob Wolf is involved with in the city of Reno. They took these guys with really bad health markers. They have like 12 years of data on these guys, really bad health markers. A couple of them had heart attacks, whatever. And they said, well, we're going to be really strict. We're going to put them exactly in the ADA diet. We're going to do everything just right with them because we want them on the, we want to keep them on the police force and blah, blah. And every single one of those guys got worse on the ADA diet, like 100% of them. So then they said, well, maybe that's not the right diet then. So let's try something totally crazy. And they started doing a low carb diet and
a real low carb diet.
Yeah. And then
not like 65%.
And then they found Rob Wolf's book and then they were like, oh, this guy's had all this stuff put together forever. And of course, Rob didn't even come up with that. There's been other, he studied under Lauren Cordain who had that figured out for years and Atkins had it figured out for years. And if you look at the zone diet by and large, it's kind of the same idea. Yeah. They just don't address the gut inflammation and the refined carbohydrates as much as that. But
that was a while ago. That was a good stepping stone to where we are now.
Yeah, and Atkins lost his license multiple times for promulgating his diet. Sears lost his license multiple times for promulgating his diet.
So that's like the next step for you, right? Yeah, we got to get you to lose your license at some point.
If I want to be a proper rebel,
if I want to hit any sort of notoriety or fame, I'm going to have to lose my license. So if you guys are listening, let's go.
Come at me, bro.
Come get it. So
now you'd be a professional supplement purveyor.
Both of those guys though had a lot more right than they had wrong, right? And you look at both of their diets as like that's pretty much where it seems like everything's heading, and that's where people are really getting results. And one of the great things about shows like this and just general access of the information on the internet is that people are now just trying stuff on their own and going, hey, I got great results. I got great results. I got great results. And you really can't argue with that because most of the nutritional research was done off of surveys as well, right? Just something called the NHANES, which has been, statistically tested to be useless. And it was completely debunked like decades ago that this is a useless questionnaire that we give people. But that's what we're still basing our nutritional studies off of, or those guys are.
Meaning that people are not actually reporting accularely. It's what they feel like they're eating, not actually what they're eating.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, there's some level of shame involved, obviously, because you're going to give this to a healthcare professional, and I'm going to report to you what I've eaten. And then if I ask you, hey, what did you have for dinner last Thursday? Do you remember?
How do you remember exactly what it was?
I don't have any idea what I ate last Thursday. I don't have any idea what I ate probably 2 days ago. I'd have a hard time remembering what I ate past this breakfast. Like maybe I could remember last night's dinner if I really thought about it. But
you might remember those P.F. Chang chili poppers, maybe. maybe not.
So how, depending on how bad my diarrhea is, I'd probably remember. Oh yeah, there goes.
I don't remember what I ate, Coach, but I do remember explosive diarrhea after the P.F. Chang's visit.
So I think that the tail's going to kind of wag the dog now. You're gonna have so many people out there going bullshit. Like
how long before these organizations back themselves in the corner?
Yeah, I eat all of this stuff that you tell me not to eat, and I don't eat any of the stuff you're telling me I should eat, and I'm healthier than everybody under your care.
Bacon.
We're not going to listen to you.
There's a lot of people now eating bacon, and people are doing just fucking fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Rob had a great quote at this last lecture. He said, "Bacon is the duct tape of food."
Oh God! It holds everything together.
It's like there's nothing bacon doesn't improve.
Normally, I wouldn't eat broccoli, but you throw some bacon in there, done.
Yeah. Jim Gaffigan had a great bit. He said, "I wouldn't even know what a water chestnut was if it wasn't wrapped in bacon." I've never heard of it. Yeah.
Let's take a break real quick. When we come back, we'll talk about how to find out if you're sleep deprived.
Okay.
Or you have a traumatic brain injury.
That's the same thing, actually. But we'll talk about it. Cool.
Welcome back to Nuggets Pearls, everybody. We are joined today by our special good buddy, Dr. Kirk Parsley, to talk about how do you get more testosterone is the question at hand. Doc, what do you think?
The number one way to get more testosterone without going to prison is through your testicles or your ovaries, which actually are the same organ, and just in a man they slip outside into a nasty looking bag, and in the women they stay inside.
We call it science a scrot.
Yes. And the number one way to make sure that those organs are producing testosterone is to get an adequate and quality sleep. Adequate and
I don't believe you, Doc, but it's true, right?
So
it's the number one thing you can do.
It is the number one thing you can do. I can drop your testosterone to nearly zero by keeping up for 24 hours, and then I can let you sleep, and it'll go right back to where it should have been in the first place, if assuming that we're there in the first place. So the problem I always get when I tell people that is, hey, I don't have enough time, or I try to go to sleep, but I can't. So what are your what are your best interventions for going to sleep? So the first thing I tell them to do is set an alarm clock to go to sleep, just like you set an alarm clock to get up in the morning. And when that alarm clock goes off, that's not an optional thing. That alarm clock says, hey, now's the time that I need to go to sleep, because from now until that alarm clock goes off is the time where I am going to restore my body to be able to do whatever I want to do for the rest of my life, achieve every goal I want to achieve. So that's a no bullshit alarm. That thing goes off. Everything goes off. No more emails. There's no more YouTube. There's no more watching one more porn video or whatever your gig is. It's like, that's it. It's over. Day's over. I'm going to start winding down. I recommend getting rid of all the electronics in your room, in your bedroom, period. Obviously, when that alarm goes off, no more electronics are on. Your television's not on, your computer's not on, you aren't using your iPhone.
Cut these bright-ass lights off.
Get these bright lights off. You dim all that stuff down. You start winding down. You can take a cool bath. You can, if you have a nighttime tea you like to drink, whatever your ritual is, you get your pajamas on. Do whatever your kind of thing is. Do some stretching. Listen to some relaxing music. Do a little meditation, a little breathing. Whatever you can do to sort of reduce your stress. You create a ritual that's somewhere about an hour long, and then you get in bed, and then that's it. Once I go to bed, there's no electronics in my room. There's nothing, no lights that are going to wake me up. I don't see an alarm clock, so I can't start calculating. I'm not asleep yet. It's, I said 10, it's 10:01. I'm not asleep yet. Oh, it's 10:07. Or if you wake up in the middle of the night and you see your alarm clock and you start calculating how much more time do you have to sleep because you still feel tired.
Done that one.
Yeah, get rid of all of that.
Every night, basically, I do that.
The alarm clock goes in the drawer or under your bed, so it'll still wake you up, but you can't ever see it. You never look at it again. You stay in bed. You relax. If you can't fall asleep, you only stay in bed about 20, 30 minutes if you have true insomnia. You can't fall asleep. You get up, you go outside of your room because you want that bed associated with sleep, right?
Oh.
And if you associate that bed with that frustrating piece of shit that I lay on and makes me anxious because I can't fall asleep, then it's
not helping.
Then you actually get insomnia from that. So you set the alarm to go to bed. You wind down, you get in bed, you lay in bed 20, 30 minutes, you're like, man, I can't quite fall asleep. You go back out into your living room, you can read it under some dim light. I would suggest better though, like to listen to some kind of quiet meditative music or something, do some breathing, do some stretching, lay on the floor, whatever kind of just makes you kind of feel cooled off. And then you get back in bed, right? You can keep doing this as many times as you need to, and people say, well, that'll shorten my overall sleep. No, it shortens your overall time in bed. You're still going to sleep the same amount.
Right.
And what will happen is progressively you'll be able to go to sleep easier and easier because you have a ritual around it. Same thing that our parents did when we were kids. We had a bath. We put our jammies on. We had some milk.
Ritual.
We read our book. And that behavior was ingrained. And the next thing that happened is you went to sleep. As adults, we say, well, I'm going to work right up until the last second, and then I'm just going to go hop in bed, and I'm going to sleep for 5 hours and 52 minutes, and then I'm going to jump up, and I'm going to do da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then we're going to live. Oh, I wonder why you're so stressed out all the time, man.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, and then the sleep you get sucks anyways.
Then
those testicles don't produce that free testosterone, man.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about this on the episode we did together a little bit, but what about pills? What about melatonin and Ambien or ZMA, or what about supplements that could help? Which ones are good? Which ones are bad?
Anything that is naturally occurring in your body that's likely to be deficient and that's involved in sleep, I'm a fan of. The one caveat that I tell people is melatonin. From the time the sun goes down until the time the sun comes up, your brain is only going to produce about 300 micrograms of melatonin. So if you go take a 1 milligram melatonin pill, you've taken 3 times more than your body needs. It's going to be released over the course of about an hour, which means that you're going to get this super big dose, and then it's all going to go away, and your brain's going to quit responding to it, and your brain's going to quit making it. So if you're going to do melatonin, use super, super low doses of it, and best to have a sustained release, which you can only get from compounding pharmacies as far as I know, but any doc can write you a script for that.
Does that mean even breaking those pills in half if that's a route you want to take?
Yeah,
keeping the dose low?
If you want to do that, you take 1 milligram pill and cut that thing into 3 pieces.
If you can do that, it's a tiny pill.
I would probably cut that into 4 pieces because you don't want too much of a dose of it. But
you can crush the pill into fine powders, give a little
snort it. Could work. Yeah, I haven't tried that.
Just a little touch of it.
We can do our own research. You can be the research subject.
Sounds like fun.
We'll film you. Let's go.
Okay. What about magnesium and Zima?
Magnesium is good. It's involved in the melatonin production pathway, but it's also a mild muscle relaxer. The one caveat again to that is that it's also a laxative. So don't think that more is better.
You don't want to shit the bed, really.
Yes, if you don't want to truly shit the bed, literally, I would keep that down to a minimal level. I'd work my way up on that. Magnesium's a good one. All of the things that are kind of built around soothing and calming you, 5-HTP, things like L-theanine, like those types of things that are known to be calming. Those are all legit. They're all things that are normal in your body. Vitamin D3 is something almost everybody is deficient in, and vitamin D3 is hugely important in sleep and 300 other metabolic pathways, but it's a big player in sleep.
But again, you probably don't need to worry about this stuff until the fundamentals of sleep ritual are in place, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed if somebody said, "Hey, I want to, I want to sort of supplement the legitimate biological, physiological things that people tend to be deficient in that interfere with sleep. I want to supplement that while I'm optimizing, my sleep ritual."
They go together.
That's okay.
Like your 3 ZMA pills and 4 hours of sleep aren't going to cut it.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're not going to be able to take any supplement that's going to make the fact that you didn't get enough sleep not matter. Like you're always going to be suffering from no sleep. You just can't get away from it. 2 + 2 is always 4.
I'll add one more tip. Get yourself a fancy sleeping mask like Doug had. You have one too, Mike, right?
I do.
A bubbled sleeping mask to block out the light, so no disturbances.
Yes, if you can't completely black out your sleeping environment, which would be my number one suggestion, even if you have to put aluminum foil in your windows, that's the better solution.
Great.
Because
very classy.
Yeah, well, everybody think you have a meth lab, and then nobody disturbs.
By the way, I live in a trailer. I put that on my windows. I officially have a meth lab.
Yeah, it's very fitting. Like a trailer with meth lab's fine. So, completely black out the environment. If you cannot black out the environment, the next best thing is that eye mask. But there is some suggestion that actually just light hitting your skin can affect the sleep architecture as well. So that's the second order thing. And then the third thing that I always say in there is to keep your bedroom as cool as you can. Actually, the ideal sleeping temperature at night is 67 degrees, which means that you probably need an air conditioning most of the year in most places, or not most places, but definitely in California. But in most places in the summer, you need air conditioning.
There are other places
that have perfect weather.
There are a lot of places
we need a ritual. We can use supplements to strategically replace things we know are probably deficient in. We're going to silence and cool down our bedrooms. And if we do that, we'll be ass-kicking huge testicle machines, won't we?
Yeah, you'll all be.
Don't forget about the ovaries.
Yep.
And ovaries as well, ladies.
Yep.
You want John ovaries?
And
get your sleep.
Who doesn't?
With that, Doc, I'm going to call this question nailed. See you next time, everybody.
Thanks.
And we're back.
Epic transition.
Jeez. We want to talk about, like, how is it that people are listening to this and they go, I think a lot of people are like, oh, shit, I'm sleep deprived. I'm eating too much carbs, whatever. But
I've got kids.
I think, like, if someone wants to follow a diet it's good, there's a lot of stuff out there. You have the Whole30, you have Rob Wolf. You can go do those things and do, like, an elimination diet where you knock everything out for a month, and then you kind of, like, add things in and kind of find out what you're sensitive to and what's throwing you off. But when it comes to sleep, you're kind of the guy. So I want to, like, find out from you, like, a lot of us would go, oh, I got a little extra around here. I should probably cut some carbs out of my diet. That's right. And when it comes to sleep, people are like, 6 hours is plenty. That's all I've ever needed. And would you disagree with that?
Yeah, absolutely I would. So, of course I would.
Someone get the sugar and caffeine out of that kid's hands.
Yeah, that's a nice pirouette, by the way. This is an argument that I really get into with again, like the corporate, the C-level guys don't want to hear.
Monsters.
They don't want to hear this. And then the other thing that I constantly hear is what you say is, well, I feel fine after 6 hours, right? Like, I feel fine. I'm like, okay, well, there's great research on this that I can tell you exactly why you feel fine. And it's exactly the same thing that happens when you go to a bar. You go to a bar and you have a drink, and you're like,
feel great.
You're like, I better not have another drink because I got to drive home in an hour. So I'm not going to have And then all your buddies are like, oh, you're a pussy. You can drink. And you're like, all right, I'll have one more beer. And then you're like, it's 2 beers. I'm going to have to wait around a while. And then next thing you know, you're having another beer, and you're like, I don't know.
Next thing you know, your pants are off.
I better get a cab. And then like the 4th beer, you're like, I can drive. I feel totally fine. I don't know what I was skitsing about before. Like I feel great, right? Like you lose that.
It's like you know me.
Yeah. You lose that self-awareness, right? So what the research has shown over and over again, this has been done so many times, like I won't even bother quoting one, but if you test people, and sleep will fuck with your performance on anything. Doesn't matter. Like, I don't care what your goals are. Sleep's important for achieving that goal. And if you want to be super strong, super fast, super enduring, super smart,
super anything,
and you don't get enough sleep, you're never going to reach your goals. Sorry. Like, or if you do reach your goals, you could have done it much faster, much easier.
Your goal was not set high enough.
You didn't set the bar high enough.
Right.
So what the research shows is that if you sleep acclimatize people first, that's the big problem, right? So now to compare that with your diet nutrition, right? It's like with your diet examples, like, okay, well, I'm not going to do an elimination diet, but what I'm going to do is a sleep saturation diet, right? So I'm going to saturate myself with sleep until I know I don't need any more, and then I'm going to test how much sleep I actually need. That would be the way to do it. The problem is most people can't do that with their lives. They don't have. I mean, I'll agree with you. Okay, you probably don't have the time to do that.
I actually did that once. I had a month period where I could get 9 hours a night.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't let myself get out of bed until I hit like that 9 hour mark. And then I knew what it was like to sleep well, and my performance started going really well, and then
So
exactly what
it's working too well. I better stop.
So this sleep acclimatization studies have been done over and over again, and they've done them in like old bunkers so they can keep it to like totally dark. They've converted old military barracks and just like walled off the windows where it's completely pitch black. By and large, this is done on college students because they're the only ones who have the time to do this, like during their summer break or whatever.
The college student is like, I don't have time for shit. I'm like, you have no idea. You're in for a rude awakening, my friend. You got a ton of time.
And they're the only ones who are willing to do it for the paltry amount of money that they can give them to be part of this.
$100.
So, but what happens, you take the average American, and people say, how do I know if I'm sleep deprived? I'm like, well, do you live in America? Do your friends think you're weird because you sleep too much? Then you're probably sleep deprived, right? Because
you called an asshole for taking a nap.
Just about every American is sleep deprived. The average American sleeps about 6.2 hours a night right now, right? So what we find, we completely sleep acclimatize these guys, and the way we do that is we say, we're going to put you in a completely dark room that has nothing but a bed and a toilet in it. Nothing else. Literally nothing else. It's going to be a nice cool room because we sleep better when it's cool. And you're going to be in complete darkness for 14 hours a day. And then we're going to let you out for 10 hours a day. And then
that's a long time, man.
And then you're coming back in for 14 more hours, and we're going to stretch this out as long as we need to. What happens is about 90% of the people come in and will sleep about 12 and a half hours when they first start sleeping because they've lost all of the sensory input. They don't know that the world's going on, and they're not aware. There's nothing for them to be aware of. So they're in complete isolation.
By the way, I've heard this is a great way to set up your bedroom, period.
Absolutely.
It's just like...
Part of the sleep hygiene is definitely making your room dark, cold, getting rid of all the electronics, getting rid of anything that...
But also like making it a place to sleep and nothing else.
Well, sleep and sex are the only two things you can do in your bed, right? And I always clarify that I'm not saying you can't have sex elsewhere, but I mean, you only sleep and sex in your bed. And
as a trained medical professional, I would not tell you not to have sex other places. I'm just saying.
Don't sleep on the kitchen counter, but you can do other things in the kitchen. Right? We won't get into people's own ideas. But anyway, so they sleep about 12 and a half hours a day, and then slowly they start sleeping less and less and less, even though they're in 14 hours of darkness, right? And it takes about 3 to 4 weeks before they'll start sleeping 7.5 hours to 8 hours a night, which is what is always turns out to be the average, no matter... how much?
So they're catching up in the beginning, and then they level out around 7.5. 8.
Yes. So if you think about this the other way around, that means that these people are sitting in a completely cool, dark room in a bed for 6.5 hours a day and staying awake. pretty damn hard to do, right? So if you can't do that, you're probably sleep deprived, right? And I don't think most of us could do that. And then what we do is we pull those people out and say, all right, you're completely sleep acclimatized now. We know you're optimized in the sleep field. We're going to start testing you, and you choose the test. I don't care. It's been done within.
This is the fourth wheel going back on stage, right?
Yeah. So we've put the fourth wheel back on, and now we're going to test your performance. And so we start testing your performance every morning. But some of you aren't going to get to sleep 8 hours anymore. You're only going to get 6, and some of you are only going to get 4. And then we're still going to test you the next day. And the next morning, we'll test them, and it'll say, "How do you think you did?" Right? And you get to rate yourself, and they say, "Well, I did shitty. I didn't. I'm tired. I didn't get enough sleep." Right? The guys who didn't get to 8 hours. And then the next day they say the same thing. And then the third day they might say the same thing. But by the fourth day, they're like, I feel fine. I've totally adapted, and I'm sure I did just as well as I ever did. And you go, no, look at the data. Like, your error rate was 3 times what it was just 2 days ago. And they go, oh, you got that wrong. I know I did well. I felt it. I knew I did well. And you can do the same thing with strength. You can do the same thing with endurance.
That's the fourth beer syndrome.
Look at the damn stopwatch, dude. You were slower. And then, no, I wasn't. I felt I was moving. I could tell. That felt good. And so, really when you...
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, so really if you wanted like completely sleep acclimatized, that's the way to do it. But how many people can truly do that? Like, I grant you that most people can't swing something like that.
People would have to like burn up all their vacation days in order to make that happen.
But what I tell people is that if you can set your life up in a way to where you can go to sleep and wake up feeling good, feeling refreshed without an alarm clock every day, you're probably sleep acclimatized. And you can do things, you're probably getting the right amount of sleep, right? And we know that there's something called a sleep debt, just like credit card debt. If you go years living off of credit cards, you're paying that back for years and years and years. We don't know how quickly you can pay back sleep debt. Let's say if you just sleep, like I need 8 hours of sleep, but if I were sleep optimized, I would need 8 hours every night, say, right? But I'm sleep deprived, so I need at least... 8.5. Or like I'm trying to pay that debt back. I'm going to do a little bit more. We don't know how quickly you can pay it back that way, right? But all I say is get as much sleep as you possibly can. Get the best sleep you possibly can. And then if you can get to a point where you're waking up, going to sleep roughly about the same time every night, waking up about the same time every morning, you don't need an alarm clock and you feel good when you get up, call that good enough, right?
Yeah.
Like you could take further steps to see if you truly optimize, but have any of you heard of the computer program Lumosity?
Yeah.
So it's like brain games kind of things, but it helps maintain cognitive function and even advance it in some cases. A program out of Stanford. I've been doing it for years, and something they've just recently added is a little sleep questionnaire in there. So every day before you start your training, they say, how do you feel and how many hours did you sleep?
And then the results to it?
And then over a period of time, they'll show you the correlation with, seems like you perform best after this much sleep, right? And if we look at the trend, where every time you've slept 6 hours, you sucked, and every time you've slept 9 hours, you've done your best, right? Or whatever it is. But you have to have adequate data to get that. So you have to do it for a while to get that out. But by and large, if somebody says, how much do I need to sleep? 99% of us need 7.5 hours plus or minus half an hour. That's gonna be most of us, right?
One thing I find is if I'm training hard, and Doug says this is like for every hour you're training, you probably need to add another hour.
Yeah. Well, so, I'm not sure if there would be a rule of thumb for that. I don't know. That there could be, but definitely I always tell people
gives you something to shoot for.
We're averaging over the course of a year. If you've had an extraordinarily difficult time, you've worked out really hard. You've really stressed your body or your brain.
If you're training at like the competitive athlete level, where you've got a 4 hours of intense training a day spread out over 2 or 3 sessions,
right? You
probably need more like 10.
You're going to need more. You're probably more like a 9-hour kind of person at that point if you were average before.
Yeah, and I've had athletes or just clients just trying to lose weight or something like. They show me the diet log. Everything's just right. And I keep asking them, what about the sleep? And they're like, 5 hours. 5 hours.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the one variable that's keeping me from everything. And I've actually, my mom actually works like with sleep a little bit. And the CPAP stuff.
Right.
A lot of times they get someone a CPAP machine and they get high quality sleep for the first time, and the weight starts dropping off of them.
Absolutely.
'Cause they haven't slept and they haven't had high quality sleep in forever. They don't even change the diet. They change the sleep, and all of a sudden they start getting leaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you sleep restrict yourself 1 hour a night, so you don't change anything else in your life, save today we're going to say go. All of us are going to keep doing what we always do, but we're going to sleep 1 hour less. On average, you will all gain 14.5 pounds of fat over the course of a year. And that's primarily driven by the insulin sensitivity and the leptin sensitivity, which I think we talked a little bit about in the last show. Is that if you short sleep yourself, and that's defined as 2 hours less sleep than you need, we know if you short sleep yourself, your insulin sensitivity goes down by about 30%. So if you're the average American, you literally wake up a diabetic. Okay, like you're functioning as a diabetic throughout the day. You might recover some of that and be a little more insulin sensitive depending on what you eat and if you exercise and other things like that. But you'll drop your testosterone 30%, you'll drop your insulin sensitivity 30%, and you'll drop your leptin sensitivity 30%, which basically then means your body's not going to use fat as a fuel source. So now you're hungry, your blood glucose is disturbed. You're going to eat 25% more calories, and that's probably going
ice cream.
It's going to be highly refined carbohydrates. That's what you're going to crave. So, and because of your lack of insulin sensitivity and your lack of leptin sensitivity, you are going to store all of that as fat, and it's not going to your muscles to fuel your muscles. Even if you exercise, it's not going to go fuel your muscles anymore.
To condense that down, you kind of just said if you don't get enough sleep, you're going to crave more sugar, and it's going to make you fat.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's other reasons that it's going to make you fat, but it's a very obvious one. And that's why we have coffee and donuts, right? Because you're going to crave fat because your leptin sensitivity is going to be...
They do go together really well.
Yeah.
It's a complementary pairing for sure.
And
don't argue with the doctor. They're delicious.
And it's hyper palatable, right? Like you can, if you mix fat with the right kind of refined carbohydrate, like that's...
And toss some caffeine on top and make you feel like
that's just delicious.
See, I used to do that when I was... Yeah, during times of sleep deprivation, I really did enjoy the coffee and donuts. This all makes sense now.
Yeah. Like you absolutely crave it, and that's why, that's why we have this this social joke about cops and donuts, right? Because they work these ridiculous shifts, right? And a lot of them they're working night shifts, or they're alternating shifts back and forth. They're chronically sleep deprived. Their insulin sensitivity sucks. Their brain blood glucose is crashing. They're they can feel their brain shutting down. Like, I suck. My performance is going down. What do I feel like I need? My brain's telling me I need sugar and I need fat. And I know because of social reasons that I need caffeine too, because that's going to help it. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to go get coffee and donuts. I'm going to get coffee and a Cinnabon.
You're the first guy to go on record with a scientific hypothesis for why cops eat so many damn donuts.
Yeah,
it sounds like your paper.
You heard it first
You should
here.
write this up, submit it to Nature.
Yeah, I could get published for this one. This note to self. Yeah. Okay. So somebody write that down.
So earlier today you were saying that sleep deprivation and traumatic brain injury were almost like identical as far as symptoms go.
Yeah, and
they are identical.
Yeah, they from the types of things I measure, they are identical. And some of the things I don't measure, like one of the things we know is that if you
actually want to repeat that, just because I'm not sure everyone's going to catch that, because I know you're going to start using.
I'm going to say it again.
All right, I'm going
to say it again. So one of the things that happens with sleep deprivation is you lose brain mass, right? So even after a single night of sleep deprivation,
by the way,
with high enough resolution imaging that we have now. We found that after a single night of sleep deprivation, we can measure brain loss, right? Like, you've actually lost myelinization.
Fuck, you're scaring the shit out of me.
So what?
I never sleep 8 hours.
Right.
Can't.
So what is TBI?
Very big head though. So,
but my brain is tiny within it.
It's like that Homer Simpson X-ray picture.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a walnut. I'm like a fucking T-Rex.
That I love that cartoon. It was a little Homer Simpson brain. That thing's awesome. So if what is TBI, right? Traumatic brain injury just means that we've broken some neuronal tracks that need to be there, right? So we've damaged some neurons. We've probably lost some myelin, which is like the coating around there that helps with the conduction.
And that happens by getting hit in the head a lot. Boxers, football players.
The scary thing is, I hate to bash research and then refer to it, but JAMA published a research article where they did something called a DTI, which is a super, super high resolution imaging of the brain.
So it's Journal of American Medical Association.
Yeah. And which is considered the go-to premier journal. If it comes out of there, it's truth, it's gospel. And what they found is that the acceleration changes on a roller coaster were enough to break a neuronal tract and get technically a TBI. Would that be a noticeable TBI? Probably not, right? But
statistically significant, but not necessarily significant.
But what
Dude, Disney World's about to come after your ass.
Yeah. so what got me thinking along those tracks is, as we talked about in the last show, like all these SEALs came and presented this litany of really complex and seemingly unrelated symptoms that I just had no idea where to start. And I eventually sort of narrowed in on the fact that a ton of them were using sleep aids and some were drinking to go to sleep, kind of settle themselves down. And that's something we didn't totally geek out on, but that's really the balance of the autonomics, parasympathetics, and sympathetics, which you can imagine be screwed up in anyone with a really stressful lifestyle, which probably getting shot at and shooting people would fit in the box, right? You should probably check that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then
it's up there with having way too many emails in my inbox.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's right under there. It's right underneath.
It's a close second right there.
Yeah.
And so I go to this lecture just out of curiosity. I'm at this symposium, and it was primarily about hormones was what the lecture was about. And I see this one on TBI. And the military has opened this organization called NICO, which is essentially a research center for brain injury. And this lecture, I hear this lecturer talking about all the effects, and he's working with boxers, and he's working with NFL guys who everybody knows, more likely have brain injury, so and so.
Yeah, that's a big time news story now.
Yeah, and then, but he had also done some work with the Marines, and he talked a little bit about that data. But he starts throwing up his case reports of like, here's my patient, here's his hormones levels of his thyroid, this is what his testosterone look like, this is what this look like, this is what his magnesium, his vitamin D3, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, that looks exactly like every patient that I'm treating. And I had already sent one patient to NICO for research on TBI, but this is a guy who had an RPG blow up right here, right? And was knocked unconscious and couldn't sleep anymore and was confused and had all sorts of weird things going on with them.
Big time brain injury.
Yeah, so we're like, okay, that's a no-brainer. Probably there's TBI. You should go here. But then I start looking through that, and I'm like, wow, well, I'm going to do some more research. And then I start researching. I find this JAMA article, and I'm like, well, 1.2 Gs causes a very, very minor TBI. But you look at all of the equipment that special forces use, or even law enforcement use, or anything like that. You're talking about way more than G, right? The fast boat transit 60 Gs or something. Parachutes open in the 30 G range. I think the Carl Gustav anti-tank weapon. I think that's somewhere between 200 and 300 Gs to fire that thing once, right?
What?
So I'm like, all right, well,
I've got a buddy who had an explosive go off so close to him, something that he put the laser on target. The bomb's so big that it makes him throw up.
Yeah.
Physically, the percussion makes him throw up. I'm
wow.
Right.
That's a big ass bomb.
That is not safe.
Right. and when you're breaching doors and currently, one of the things that always was going through my head when I was trying to unravel this thing with the SEALs is what are SEALs doing today that they weren't doing when I was a SEAL? Besides, obviously, they're doing way more combat, right?
Yeah.
But my genre of SEALs had very minimal combat. So, okay, you can add that in as a stressor, and maybe that's a big component, but is there anything else? And then that's kind of when the sleep thing occurred to me. Not that the culture hasn't always kind of sleep deprived themselves, but much worse now. But then I started thinking about TBI, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of concerning. And then I started looking up the symptoms of TBIs, and then you start looking at the metrics of TBIs. You start looking at what does somebody's metabolic and hormonal profile look like if they have a traumatic brain injury. And it looks exactly like somebody who's sleep deprived.
Wow. This is a hand-in-hand condition.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I could put the two next to it, and you could say, which one of these? I have no idea. They look exactly the same. And we know that you can dig through the journals more, and it's a known fact that having a traumatic brain injury affects your hormone productions. And like I said, you can't affect just one hormone. So all your hormones start going off, and then your neurotransmitters start changing. now your mood's changing and all sorts of other things are happening. And now you develop PTSD, right? Or PTSD-like symptoms. You're getting depressed or you're getting anxious or you're hyper-arousal and all these other things are going on. It's like, well, which one drove this? And then, then you really, if you really want to piss yourself off a little bit more, you twist that up on its head and you say, what does sleep do to TBI and what does TBI do to sleep?
They accelerate each other, right?
Right. So yeah, you sleep deprive yourself, you're more susceptible to TBI. You're more susceptible to PTSD. You have PTSD, you have TBI, you almost certainly have sleep deprivation along with it, because that's one of the major symptoms of TBI and PTSD is disturbances in sleep. And then the Medical Disease Prevention or Disease Management Organization gives you pills to cover up those symptoms that are keeping you from sleeping well, which is just basically hypnotics, which are just suppressing everything.
But hypnotics sound like a fun drug. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the same thing in the medical world.
So what happens with these guys? Like you get a boxer comes to you. He's got 3 kids and a corporate job, and he's a boxer, and he's got traumatic brain injury because he's been punched in the head for 10 years, and he's not sleeping. Like, where do you start with that guy? What do you do?
Yeah, well, I start with that guy the same way I start with every other guy.
Can you start with me now? Because that's what my life was for a long time.
So I've managed some professional football players. Their labs look exactly the same. Unfortunately, these guys you can't even correct because everything's banned on them. Like they can't even take simple vitamins or like there's all sorts of limitations to what you can do to these guys. So they just suffer.
Like from the NFL or what?
Yeah. Because NFL
because you're a cheater.
Blocks
if you take fucking anything.
You can't give them supplements. Whatnot.
You're a cheater if you eat too much protein in one sitting. So it's just gotten ridiculous to where they're banning everything. And the average NFL athlete only lives to be like 56 years old now.
Yeah, it's really shockingly low.
That's something that should be publicized. They're probably burying the fuck out of that statistic.
And then
that's fucking what 25, 30 years off of what
it's
should be.
about 20 years below
56.
It's like 56 years old.
Some people are just getting started in life at that point.
This is something that fucking actually honestly terrifies me because I'm somebody, I worked a stressful corporate job for a long time. I've got kids that don't sleep, but it's my physical culture history. I know at least 5 incidents playing Division I football and high school football, mostly on like crackback plays. So when I would run across the field in pursuit of a guy with a ball, them setting up waves of blocking where I got completely, Doug, you probably had a couple of these, completely fucking like things you would see on YouTube where I got hit.
Blindsided.
I lost consciousness completely. I woke up. One time I got hit so hard that everything went brilliant white light. And I woke up with my hands on my knees. I had gone off the ground. I was standing on my own. And I rose up, and it was like my brain coming back online. I went, and all of a sudden my body remembered, breathe and shit.
Yeah.
That happened at least 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
And then there's no fucking telling how many daily just smack, my head full speed up against a 300-pound guy. I mean, how many times did that happen?
Yeah.
And I left that sport, and powerlifting was not as, it was kinder in many ways, but still a tough road. Then working a corporate job and having kids. So this is a terribly close-hitting topic for me because I'm also my blood panels 2 years ago were disastrous.
Yeah.
Vitamin D, DHEA, fucking testosterone, everything, just thyroid, everything.
Probably your insulin
flatline.
sensitivity, all that stuff.
I don't think I have a problem with that at the time, but everything else that was clear was like just flatlining.
Yeah.
And I thought I was just like this. The thing that makes me upset is that there's a lot of athletes out there who, like at the time, I was like, I just not feeling like I'm into my sport anymore. I can't recover. My joints are fucking God. I guess it's time I hang up my cleats.
There's a thing.
I quit training.
Been drug free his whole life, so it's not like a lot of these athletes are on drugs, so they're not experiencing that same thing. You're drug free, and all of a sudden your hormones.
No, but I look back on it, I go, wow, I thought that I was just. It had run its course, and it was time to move on. But I realized that this was the manifestation of these symptoms slowly but surely.
Exactly, and the SEALs were reporting the exact same thing, right? When they were coming and closing the door and saying, "Hey, let me tell you what's really going on," they're talking about the same type of things that you are. It's like, dude, my career's not over, but I feel like I'm over. It's like I don't want to do this. I'm going to do it every day. They're going to do what they're supposed to do. They're going to do the job, but they're not feeling like doing it. And little things, like walking into a room and be like, shit, what did I come in here for, man? And
my wife will
say. And then you're like, whatever. And you walk out and you come back, oh, yeah. And then, this one guy, this one SEAL who openly talked about his TBI, he's one of the first guys to go to NICO. And he actually worked with that lecturer that I heard on on the TBI. His name is Mark Gordon. He has a clinic up out of L.A.
He's been on the Rogan podcast.
Yeah, and he was on the Rogan podcast.
Discussions.
Yeah, one of the SEALs that I was treating who had a known TBI, had been to NICO, and he worked with Mark Gordon for a while too. But one of the things that he started going and presenting like to all the cells of different teams and saying, hey, if you're noticing these symptoms, like you should probably go get checked out for TBI. And everybody's kind of like, but
because that's a sign of weakness or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign of weakness. Like, dude, you're just not hard enough. Whatever. Go suck your thumb. Go do something else. Like, we're hard asses, and a lot of these guys got ostracized. Like, some absolute legendary SEALs go to NICO, and they're kind of like, we're not so sure about that guy anymore, right? And that's coming around. Like, there's more and more acceptance of it. The VA and the East Coast SEAL Foundation just recently came together on an effort to start figuring out a little bit more about TBI, doing some research on it. But the point is that these guys had all these symptoms, and they were just explaining it away with the fact, well, I'm getting old, right? Like, I'm just old, right? And it's like, dude, you are 36. Like, that's not old by anybody's standard. But in the SEAL teams, that is old. And in the NFL, that is old. And as a boxer, that's really old. And why? Because you've damaged the hell out of yourself, right?
Right.
And you've done it for, the SEALs, they've done it through trauma, and they've done it through sleep deprivation, and they've done it through overtraining, and they've done it through excess stress. And so they're probably like the worst cohort that's out there.
Right.
So it's the most severe population. But you can take 10% off of that and maybe even ratchet some of those things up. Like, boxers probably have more TBIs. And the NFL, of course, is studying the hell out of this, and we have the sad stories of like Junior Seau, that we know on an autopsy had significant brain.
He put a knife or a gun in his chest. And
he shot himself through the chest, and there's theories that there are a couple of guys have done this so that people would research their brain and like kind of say to the NFL, look, dude, here's proof, right? Because if you shoot yourself through the head, then they can say, look, there's significant brain matter loss here, and here, which we know is associated with repeated head injury. So how do we get better from that? Mm-hmm. Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. Like, will your brain repair itself? Yes. How quickly? I don't know. Like, a spinal cord will repair itself over about 3,000 years, right? So you don't live that long, so that's not going to happen. But like, how quickly can you remyelinate your brain? How quickly can you learn alternative ways of thinking or behaving that will allow you to function normally, even though that track's gone or whatever, right? So like, the 15 gets shut down, you can go on the 805, you can go on the 163, you can get to the same place, but that, that's gone, right? So, and it could be really bad. Like, you might have to go, to San Francisco via Dallas or something, like the track's really long. But in the terms of how fast the brain is, these will be kind of minimally observable changes in your brain. But again, it all comes back to the 4 pillars, right? You have to do all of that other stuff first before you have any chance that your brain's going to repair itself.
Right.
And when I say you optimize your nutrition and your sleep and your activity and your stress, that's your behavioral modification. But you should be working with somebody who's measuring what are actually the metabolic effects of that. Are we hitting our target goals, right? And then the pharmaceutical should be the absolute last resort. But, we can try modifying nutrition. We can try adding in some supplements. We can try some pro-hormones. We can just give you hormones back. Like, we know if you get one brain injury, the odds are you're what we call the HPTA axis. So like your hormone production axis, where your brain communicating with your body about how much sex hormone you have and thyroid hormone you have and all that. We know that about 85% of people are going to have some significant disturbances in that for probably up to about 2 years. So one incident, and we're talking about like car crashes or motorcycle crashes. Something. One incident, okay, maybe if you replace that guy's hormones for 2 years, and then slowly titrate him off and like boost his own production and optimize the rest of his life, maybe he reproduces them, and it's done, right? And then he lives a normal life. However, what if you have 500 of these things, right? And they've all been spaced over who knows how long?
That's me.
It's like
that's probably you too, Doug.
Nobody knows. Like there's no way to know. We can't look inside your brain every day and go, oh yeah, that's getting a little thicker. It's looking better. Or go sample your brain chemistry every day. We can't do that. So we can do it through performance markers. We can do it by how you feel. We can do it through hormone markers, blood. We can do it through blood. And it's really more about performance, and whatever that performance is. I don't care if it's being a great father, playing with your kids, or running a Fortune 500 company, or lifting the most weight in the world over your head, or like whatever your goals are. You should be able to monitor that. And one of the great markers for TBI, I believe, is the balance of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetics versus the sympathetics. When we're stressed, sympathetics dominate, and we have a very, very low variability in our heart rate, which means the difference between one heartbeat and the next is very, very, very consistent. There's low variability. As you're balanced, it's like sometimes there's some parasympathetic there, sometimes there's some sympathetic there, and the beat to beat is variable. And that's called heart rate variability. And surprisingly, when you have high heart rate variability, you have very high concentration levels, right? You have very good awareness. You have maximum willpower. You're usually in a much better mood. You can handle stress way better. And guess what? You shoot more accurately, and you lift more weight, and you run farther, and you run faster in your distance competition or in your sprint or whatever it is you do. You perform better when your heart rate variability is good. And there's actually little devices to train on heart rate variability, but you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself and say, okay, well, I'm going to put this app on my iPhone, and as soon as I optimize this, I'm set.
Again,
right?
don't let the tail wag the dog.
Exactly.
Just use it as a tool.
Right. So this is a training tool to add to all of the other stuff that you know damn well you need to do. And you would think that it'd be really easy to sell people on sleep, right? Like sleep feels good, like it's an enjoyable experience, and it's like, beds are comfortable, they're a nice place to be. But it's like I'm telling them, to choose which kid to sacrifice. It's like I'm like, dude, you just need to sleep more. But sleep as much as you should, and eat the food you're supposed to, and be active, and find ways to reduce your stress. And the heart rate variability trainer is one way to do that. There's other things to do. Meditation does that, right? Simple breathing, like gives breathing exercises that do that. There's biofeedback that does that. There's neurofeedback that does that. There's all sorts of ways. And once you get the lifestyle optimized, you're not thinking of this as an intervention. It's not a diet, right? It's not like a 12-week program.
Right.
This you are going to do for the rest of your life,
starting
to the
new
best
habits
of your ability.
forever.
So we're going to change my behavior around sleep. I'm going to change my behavior around food. I'm going to change my behavior around activity. I'm going to change how I deal with stress. And I'm going to keep getting better at this stuff for the rest of my life.
So even if you're a guy who has the brain trauma, the sleep habits, all this is true. Just like the doctor prescribing the Adderall to fix. I guess if you dumped a bunch of hormones exogenously onto this without first, again, hitting the fundamental 4 and seeing what that does first, I guess it's also a mistake.
Well, it's a mistake because now you're masking the problem with your quasi-solution.
You might feel better, but still.
And you're going to feel better, right? So if somebody is chronically sleep deprived and I give them Adderall every day, they'll feel more alert every day. If I give them cocaine every day, they're going to feel more alert all day.
Hey, all right.
It's like, hey, I feel great.
I have so many clients.
It's strange how that works.
and I'm covered.
Drugs work, folks.
Yeah.
Drugs work.
So
That's true.
I'm covering up the symptom with my treatment. So now they still have all of these things wrong. Now, replenishing hormones, I'm all for it, right? Because that's something that's naturally in your body. That's not a pharmacological trick. It's not like I'm saying
if you are down, you're not cheating because you're restoring what should be there.
Yeah, and I don't think ISIS is going to complain that somebody's cheating. Like, hey, that guy shot me first. Let's have him tested, right? So, but.
I feel like in war, you should be cheating. You should be cheating as much as
I'm
you
trying
can.
to kill you. I guess the rules like ethics don't apply, do they? I'm trying to
only
shoot you in the face with a gun here.
There's no second place.
There's only 2 options, right? Yeah, there's no second. Like, you have always won. You're undefeated or you're dead. Those are your 2 options. So, like, everybody needs to be undefeated and whatever it takes to get there. But yeah, I'm all for let's replenish the hormones, but I'm also for let's make sure that your body can't do it with all of this stuff first, right?
Right.
And let's make sure that we can't do it with less invasive things. So, let's do the minimum effective dose of anything that we're going to use, right? And you see the exact opposite of that happening in the general medical treatment. So you come in and you complain of all these symptoms, and they say, well, you probably have ADD, so I'm going to start you on this, and then the reason you can't sleep, is because of an Ambien deficiency, and the reason you can't concentrate is because of an Adderall deficiency, and then you're you're depressed because you have a Prozac deficiency.
Oh, here's some Lipitor because you like bacon too much.
and so you just keep adding on all of these things, and that's definitely a mistake. Now, how quickly do you start throwing things in there? You're like, I say it's really hard to recover without hormones being where they should. And a young guy, you do things like what bodybuilders call the post-cycle therapy recovery stuff. Like you do things to stimulate testosterone production, hoping that this guy his body will keep going with it afterward. Like that should be the first intervention, right? Because you start giving anybody an exogenous hormone, and especially in relatively high doses of it, because he's way low, so you're gonna have to give him a pretty good whack to get him up to where he should be. You keep doing that for a few years, and guess what? He's not going to do anymore. Like his body's like, your body is a smart organism. It's like, hey, I'm getting the shit for free. I'm going to use all this energy to do something else. I'm not making any more of this, right?
So what bodybuilders are doing is way more extreme than what hormone replacement therapy is. Yeah.
So
it's not the same thing.
The idea of hormone replacement therapy is getting you back to ideal, like where you should be for somebody your age who does the type of things that you do. And we know where that is. We act like we don't. And we say a normal range is anywhere from 250 to 1100.
For testosterone.
I'm like,
let's put you at 1100.
Yeah, and it's like, you're 280, you're fine.
I think mine may have been like 100 or something, or lower. Do you know what yours was?
Mine's only like 450. It's not very high.
I mean, my hit rock bottom there for a while.
Yeah. So, I mean, so now you get into this really confusing area. It's like, okay, this guy has a ton of TBI, right? All right. You have multiple.
Yeah.
You don't sleep enough as well. Your diet isn't where it should be as well. All of these things affect your hormones, right? So it's like, well, where do I start? Start with the lifestyle stuff, right? So, and I think, my prejudice, of course, why I'm the sleep guy is because I think sleep is the most important thing. I can break you faster by sleep depriving you than anything else. I can starve you for a month, and you keep going, nah, I'm not doing what you say.
Right.
I sleep deprive you for 2 or 3 days. You've been through hell week. You're a puppet on a string. I'll make you do whatever I want you to do at that point.
Put you in Guantanamo and play Bon Jovi loud for fucking 2 weeks in a row.
Oh, the horror. The horror. Please. Don't mistreat war criminals.
I'll tell you whatever you want. Just turn that shit off.
Yeah. So, I mean, treating guys to get them back where they should be, but starting with the pillars that we know should be there. And my preference is sleep. Like, we know every person who becomes depressed, if you track them back far enough, they usually had sleep deprivation leading up to the depression. Even people who have psychotic breaks and bipolar, like really start exhibiting the bipolar, they almost always have a pre-phase of sleep disruption. And we know that if you're susceptible to any kind of mood disorder or cognitive disorder, sleep deprivation makes that worse. We also know that sleep changes your physiology. Like I have this great graph on incident of injuries, your injury risk. And it's this, the slope is like this. It's crazy. From the difference between 6 hours of sleep a night and 9 hours of sleep a night is like a 45% injury risk.
God.
Just day to day, right?
On top of every other huge margin of the detriment that you face.
On top of the fact,
metabolic level and a brain function level.
So let's say for instance you have TBI, like you've had this type of lifestyle, and let's face it, like most kind of alpha male kind of guys, when we were young, we did a ton of stupid stuff, and we all hit, and we've all injured ourselves, right? Right. And so how quickly can we repair from that? I don't know, but I can tell you have a TBI, you probably have hormone disruption, right? But I know that one night of short sleep is going to make your testosterone 30% lower, right? I can give you a week of great meals. Am I going to increase your testosterone 30%? Right? No freaking way. I can give you a week of HCG, and I'm not going to increase your testosterone 30%, right? So that's a huge thing. Your insulin sensitivity is changing 30% in a single night. That's a huge factor. Get the sleep in line.
If you told people that you could increase your Fran time by 30% if you take this pill before you work out, they'd fucking jump over themselves and pay you $1,000 a month for that shit.
Exactly. And it's the same thing in the corporate world. When you look at things like mental mapping, when you look at executive functioning, like your ability to say, something called thought simulation, which we called make believe when we were a kid. Essentially, like if I do this, what's the likely thing to happen after that, right? Like what are the sequelae likely to be from this action? Well, that's an executive decision, whether you're running a company or deciding whether or not you should shoot a guy, or playing football and figuring out should I take a left here or right here, like what should I do? What's the most likely thing that's going to happen from this point on? That ability to do that drops dramatically after missing 2 hours of sleep. Right?
Yeah.
Your ability to remember like a procedure, like how to play the piano or how to take a weapon apart and put it back together or how to type or anything like that. Procedural memory, that's reinforced during sleep. If you're sleep deprived, you get worse at it the next day, right? So we can make it all about crazy stuff, but we could also make it about extreme stuff, I say, but we could also say, all right, well, I'm starting a transcription company, right? And I want the most accurate typist in the world. What's the one intervention I can do to make sure that they're all at their best? Sleep. Like that is the number one thing I can do.
So you had suggested, we were talking a while back, and you had suggested that schools should start school just 1 hour later, and they would see huge benefits in performance.
I saw a study that teenagers, the number one cause of disruptive behavior or malbehavior in teenagers was sleep deprivation.
Yeah, and there's some great organizations lobbying this, and I've posted a lot of petitions for people to sign from this organization that I follow, and they have a pretty good lobbying group. And
what's the organization so people can go?
Don't ask me that, because if I would have known, I would have said it. Now you're making it obvious that I've forgotten the name.
It's all right.
I think it's called Start School Later, actually. But
we'll get it, and then we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So you go to the website, and then you look at this, the entry, we'll have it in there.
So these people, there's a lot of researchers involved in it, but there's also people with obviously political pull to try to lobby through this, and they are successfully doing this to lots of public schools. I wouldn't say lots, but they're moving the needle. But the reason they're moving the needle is because people have done the research, and a great story is that in around 1905 we led the nation in education, and there was a study done as to figure out why. And there's this brilliant guy, I think he's a Nobel laureate, who had the final sort of say of the conclusions of all this. And he said, the reason we are better than all the rest of the Western world is because we start school 2 hours later. And as long as we keep doing that, we're going to be fine.
Oh, wow.
And then 30 years later, we changed the school time back. But
you got to keep up with those guys who are more progressive.
Exactly. So we got
Europe's doing it right all the time.
Europe's been doing this for 30 years. We're way behind. So what they've done is they've taken the school time back. And you guys have heard of circadian rhythms, right? Mm-hmm. So you have this natural drive to be awake and a natural drive to be asleep, and this rhythm is built in, and at some level it's coordinated to the sun. But when you're an adolescent, which is kind of around 12 these days because of shifts in nutrition and so forth. So from about 12,
awesome milk hormones,
and for men it can be kind of up to around 25 before your prefrontal cortex is all the way formed and
Mine's
fully
not
solidified.
Totally formed yet. Yeah.
So you have this really long period of development where kids have this huge circadian shift, right? And if you're a night owl, it gets worse. It gets worse. But all adolescents shift. And what we've done is a culture is we said, well, we need to get to work at 9 o'clock. So that means I got to get rid of the kid by 7:30 so that I can get to work at 9. Yep. We screwed the kids, not ourselves, right?
Blame it on the unions.
Yeah. So what would have happened?
Demanding 8-hour days and whatnot.
What I tell them about kids is hey, this is exactly as if I told you, I'm going to hire you for this job. You have to be really mentally productive. I need you to come in and concentrate. You're going to have to learn a lot of new stuff every day, and then I'm going to test you on this stuff, and this is going to be years of your life to do this. But I need you to start this at 3 a.m. And you would go, why would I start that at 3 a.m.? I'm not going to start learning until 7, right? You're just going to waste all those hours in between them. And that's what we do in education. And they did this with private schools because they had, they could have more pull. And so they tested it. And I think they did it to 11 or 12 private schools. Push their start time back about an hour, which is probably suboptimal. It'd be better to push it.
That makes it still 8:30.
Yeah, I think it was 8:30.
But I want to point out is the suggestions you're making are not that crazy.
No, it's
Let's
not.
move school back 1 hour.
Yes,
that's it.
Not take less school away to stay a little longer, right?
Yeah. So they did it to 11 or 12 private schools. And what they found was that behavior problems decreased dramatically. I don't have the data memorized, but their behavioral problems went down dramatically. Routine illness went down dramatically. Absenteeism went down dramatically. Academic performance increased across the board. GPAs went up. And the one thing that was really surprising to the researchers, which wasn't surprising to me at all, is that all 11 of these schools had the best sports record they had ever had that year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, that's 1 hour. What if we did that 2 hours, right?
It's just mind-boggling that it's so much effect.
And what research suggests, and the annoying thing is that we know this, right? This data has been around for decades. This isn't new stuff, like that somebody just all of a sudden going, hey, people who sleep better learn better. Like magic, like who would have ever thought of that? We've known this for a really, really long time.
Right.
And if we could make that simple implementation, we know that because of the efficiency gains with a well-slept brain, you could start school at 9:30 and you could still end it at the same time.
And still be smarter.
And they would learn more.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds cool to me, man.
What's crazy is if you saw
Sounds cool to the kids too.
Tim, where were you when I was a kid?
If you saw a newspaper article that says 1 hour of sleep more per night found to cure cancer or eliminate heart disease or whatever, you'd be like, whoa!
Actually, what it does.
Yeah, but if you
could print that article.
But if you just put it on the headline, people would not like. I guess they didn't want to accept that it's such an important thing.
Well, that'll be the title of the show.
Yeah, there's so many objections around sleep. I mean, it's more,
strange.
It's more than exercise. It's more than nutrition, right? When you tell somebody to exercise, what do they say? I don't have time. When you tell somebody to eat right, they're like, oh, okay, I'll try that, but I don't have time. I have this really tight lunch break. I travel a lot. I can't get it. I don't have time. They say the same thing around sleep, right?
I feel like the unspoken thing about sleep too is if you say, "Oh, I can't do that. I got to get more sleep," they're like, "You're being a fucking
weak.
pussy."
Yeah. Like that's akin to being weak in America. Like, well, you're supposed to be stoic and hard and just push through that.
Yeah.
Like that. But
dude, not sleeping gives you bragging rights almost.
Right, exactly. And the more stressed we become, the more tight our schedules become. The first thing we give up on is our biological needs: sleep and nutrition and exercise. Those are the first things that go, right? Like, and so we can get a little bit more time to be a little more productive at work because we all just magically, coincidentally, happen to have exactly 8 hours of work to do every day when we go to the office. Like, bullshit. Like, there's always more to be done. There's always going to be more to be done.
I've never had a to-do list that I had all the boxes checked off.
Right.
Ever.
I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's like my to-do list is 43,862 things today, which will be 20 items longer tomorrow. Because
this is why when you email me, I say you get an autoresponder that says it might be a week.
Yeah.
Before you get a response. Yeah.
Yeah, and you would, again, like I said, it should be like as easy as selling sex. Like, hey, sleep more. Like, hey, that should be great. Like, people should want to do this, but people don't. I have that TEDx talk that's 17 minutes long, right? And people don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that message, man. It's like that's not the message I wanted to hear. Was America's biggest problem. I wanted to hear something else.
I need to change the title. That's all.
Yeah, I mean,
we need to trick them.
Yeah, and
the problem doesn't sound big enough.
Yeah. America's biggest problem. I'm not sure if that sounds important enough, but and to put it in relative perspective, there's a similar link video that usually pops up when mine pops up over on the side that has 6 million hits, and I have like 45,000, right? Like 6 million views on this one, and it's how to fold a piece of notebook paper into a Chinese throwing star.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, I lost,
how
right?
Can I compete with Chinese throwing stars?
How can I compete
I
with
would sleep more. But man, I got nailed this throwing star origami shit.
Exactly. It's like, hey man, if I can't produce a good throwing star, like what's good is sleep gonna do me?
How am I gonna get laid without being able to do this awesome throwing star maneuver?
Exactly.
More sleep will get you laid more.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
Absolutely. It make you super at everything.
It does actually. Short sleep lowers libido, right? That's your ability to have sex and your desire to have sex. That drops off about the same as testosterone and insulin, about 30% with just one night of decreased sleep.
I think this is a perfect place to end it. Thanks for joining us. Where should people go to check out your stuff?
Well, I'm really trying to produce some stuff.
Trying.
Go to my site.
Doc's trying not to do nothing. Don't email him.
I'm trying to sleep. Leave me alone.
So,
you're doing
my
lectures,
site,
right?
What's that?
You're doing lectures.
Yeah. So I do lecture. Primarily, the biggest group kind of after me these days seems to be law enforcement and municipalities and DOD and DOJ. Those kind of the gigs. But I mean, I do corporate lectures. I do lectures at schools if they wanted me to. Like I'll do anything to get the word out. But my site has some information on it. I'm trying to build that more. Usually I'll link anybody's show that I'm on. I'll link that into my site as well.
It's been a lot of shows, so you should watch all those that other stuff too.
In the notes again, we'll link to all your stuff. So people miss it here, you'll be able to find links to all your stuff.
Yeah, cool. And Dan Party is another interesting guy to check out. He is a sleep researcher or a PhD in neurophysiology. He's got like all of the appetite stuff around sleep like nailed down tight. He's done some pretty cool shows. My site has a link to his site as well on there too. But he's another good source for the sleep component stuff that I check out. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, man.
Thanks for joining us, Doc.
Thanks for having me. It's always a good time.
Thanks for scaring the shit out of us. Join the conversation every week after the episode over at barbellshrug.com. This is also where you'll find new episodes of Barbell Shrugged, Technique Wad, Nuggets and Pearls, Barbell Business, Get Change, plus new articles every day on our daily blog, written by us, guests of the show, and some of the biggest names in strength and conditioning. So, go there and leave a comment now. Oh my gosh, wow, that's so cool. Yay, that's so awesome.
Did you like this video? If so, subscribe to our channel and share this with your friends.
And if you want even more free, awesome resources to help you reach your fitness goals, plus some updates that we only share over email, head over to barbellshrug.com and sign up for the newsletter.